to take up more pages than the health care bill. You remember the health care bill, of course, the one that had to pass before you could know what was in it. Then even its biggest backers started regretting every page of it. Not all of them, but a good many of them. We'll get ready for beneath the planet of the health care mess because, well, the latest immigration bill page pile-on is even worse, and if possible, could be much worse. With me now, David Callahan and Sabrina Schaeffer, Kate Obenshain. Kate, what do you make of this?
Well, the irony of this, Neil, is that this bill was intended to streamline the immigration process, and now we have an 844-page bill turned into a 1,000-plus page bill. Look, nobody's disputing the need to do something with immigration reform. The problem is this behemoth has turned into just a special interest bonanza as 500 lobbyists are lining up to write the new regulations, reap the benefits from the massive new spending and all the bureaucracies that are going to be created, not to mention the fact that it's going to bankrupt already strained entitlement programs.
Well, there's a lot we don't know. This much I do. If history is a guide, thick bills tend to be problematic bills. So what I'm wondering, Sabrina, is whether this is telegraphing trouble, just its sheer size.
It is, and you know, I think that one of the problems is it's not necessarily tackling the issues that need to be addressed. So, for instance, in the Senate right now, there's a much smaller bill that's being referred to as I-squared, Immigration and Innovation, S-169, and this is dealing with the issue of high-skilled labor, or H-1B visas. This is something that's not adequately being addressed in the current bill. So we have this, behemoth, as Kate properly described it, but it's not actually tackling some of the things that could be dealt with on a much smaller scale.
Well, I think there is a temptation, and I can understand how this happens, David. And I think certainly after the Boston bombing, I had Senator Marco Rubio here said, well, maybe you got to put provisions in for kids here on visas, or suddenly we lose track of those who have their visas revoked. So there are provisions, no doubt, put in by lawyers to add that, and then add on top of that, and add on top of that, and then you have something as unwieldy as this.
Well, there's a lot of details to be worked out. I mean, we're talking about 11 million people path to citizenship. We're talking about work authorization, border security. I'm surprised it's not 3,000 pages, Neil. I mean,
what happens with thickness, right? I mean, what happened to the healthcare law? Obviously, they don't all read that. Maybe you do, but
if you don't have a lot of details spelled out, you end up with court cases. You end up with all sorts of problems later.
What's happening with the healthcare bill now?
Or what happened with Dodd-Frank? I mean, it's been 2 years. A lot of those rules are still being written because they weren't written at the time.
All right. Well, we had a lot written at the time, Kate, with the healthcare law and the bill that became the law. And now we're only coming to discover some of the problems that even its strongest and most strident supporters are now feigning surprise or shock.
Right,
unions and a lot of other groups that are saying, wait a minute, I have a Cadillac plan, I'm responsible to pay extra for that plan. Stuff that was clearly spelled out there, but now they're protesting.
Right, and they're realizing how incredibly expensive it is. Young people are realizing how their premiums are skyrocketing. So there's so many unintended consequences or unforeseen consequences for us who couldn't read it. But I think that's the same problem that we have now. Why not, as Sabrina's suggesting, do this in a piecemeal, thoughtful approach that's going to actually make the problem better instead of creating massive new problems? That seems to be the inclination of this administration. Just pretend like you're fixing an enormous problem and just say,
well,
pat yourself on the back.
I remember, Sabrina, I remember George Bush, the last president, had this idea for a prescription drug plan under Medicare that started out to be, what was it, about $180 billion, 400-page program that turned out to a multi-trillion-dollar, just abyss. That they were adding pages and laws and other regulations upon it. So I don't know if there's a healthy medium in the bill, but I just think this is what happens. This is Washington's way.
It is, unfortunately, Washington. And look, I disagreed with a lot of the things that went on in the Bush administration, like No Child Left Behind, another massive bill. But I think one of the problems is that we're empowering Washington bureaucrats, and we're not actually helping those 11 million people necessarily. We're creating triggers and hurdles and standards and fees. We're going to see multiple agencies overseeing things, but that's not necessarily dealing with the problem, just as we didn't deal with it necessarily in health care. I mean, look at the things that we could have done in health care. We could have changed the tax code so that insurance wasn't employer-centric. We could have allowed people to purchase insurance over state lines. There's lots of things
you're
that
right.
we
Woulda,
can do
shoulda, coulda.
to,
But it is what we've got right now. So, Dave, what I'd like to ask you is, given the problems that we've discovered with the IRS, and now we're going to have the IRS play a central role in health care, at the very least, would you, David, be saying, let's go slow here?
Well, I think what's really the big news here with this immigration bill is not how long it is. It's just how much it keeps marching forward. I mean, that Gang of Eight has really hung together, and Jeff Sessions did everything possible to blow up the bill with those 17 amendments, all of which were voted down. And I think what we're seeing here is a real seismic shift.
The committee, what, 19-5 or something like this. But do you think now in this environment it would still pass a full vote?
Well, we'll see, but the Republican...
I know we'll see, but I don't think it will.
The Republican Party has certainly changed its tune on this one.
Well, but not all of them. To be fair, like you said, Marco Rubio still stands by this with some special allowances and also, ladies, I'll end with you on this. Kate, I think this thing is dead. Stick a fork in it. Really more having to do with what's happened with the health care law, what's happened with the IRS, this sudden shift away from big government where people have said, if this is what it yields, count me out.
Yeah, and concerned about how it's going to impact the economy, how it's going to impact employers who are already suffering from the health care. I think it's dead, certainly in the House, so I hope so.
Now, do you agree with that?
Well, I definitely think that there's some skepticism now of what's going to happen, and when you have numerous large agencies overseeing something. I mean, as we're dealing with the IRS scandal, as we're dealing with the Department of Justice right now, I think people are increasingly saying, wait, we need to slow down, we need to take a step back.
Why can't they, Dave, just do this like Apple does, like the little pamphlets it makes for like the iPhone, or just a pamphlet? They can't do that.
That makes sense.
They want to do it all,
sleek.
and they want to do it all in
detail.
detail.
Take a pamphlet.
You got 100 senators. They all have their own ideas.
Well, yeah, tell me about it. All right, we'll see you guys in a little bit. In the meantime, remember when they attacked this guy? All right, I'm all by myself here. My entire staff has left and signed up with ZocDoc. I'll keep you posted how that's going. In the meantime, after targeting our own James Rosen, things are not looking so rosy for Attorney General Eric Holder. He's under increasing scrutiny for when he started snooping on the media and to what degree. Now he's trying to make nice with the media, but as he's trying to quiet these scandals, lawmakers are only looking into more of those scandals. The House Judiciary Committee, for one, investigating whether the Attorney General lied under oath about this mess. Sabrina Schaeffer says if the White House wants this mess to end, Eric Holder has to go. Really?
Well, I think it's time. I mean, look, Eric Holder this is not the first time we've seen him in the middle of a scandal. Since 2009, we have seen him in the spotlight numerous times, from the time that, he insulted the American people as a nation of cowards, when he wanted to bring Khalid Sheikh Mohammed back here to New York, when he sued the state of Arizona, fast and furious. I mean, this is just one more thing in a litany of bad instances. And I'm afraid that this is an attorney general who thinks that the Constitution and the Bill of Rights adopted in 1789 are still under consideration. So I think that Congress is right to be taking some action now.
All right, there is this notion, innocent until proven guilty, Kate, so the argument could be, let's wait it out, see how much more we get, because we don't have enough right now. You say what?
Well, I think it's one of the things that tells how serious this is for Eric Holder is the fact that Bob Goodlatte, the congressman from Virginia, head of the Judiciary Committee, is the one that sent this very strongly worded letter saying, your comments contradict what we now know to be the truth. Can you clarify them? That is extremely serious, and Holder is in serious danger because of that. So I think that we're beginning to see the House of Cards falling down. I'm fascinated by how the White House continues to defend them. I think digging in deeper, defending Holder's obviously contradictory comments, saying, "Oh, he didn't mean that he had never pursued a journalist." Well, actually, he said quite clearly he had never sought prosecution of a journalist. Well, he did. He signed off on this, aiding and abetting and co-conspirator. That's what he said that James Rosen was possibly.
So that alone are grounds to say ta-ta, right? Then, David, I think here is the issue then. Usually the way it works in Washington sort of blood fests is that the blood of one served up isn't often enough. So if the Attorney General were to go, they'd immediately be looking for someone else, or all the way up to the president.
Well, I think one question for the Republican Party is just how much they want to push these scandals. You remember back after the election, Eric Cantor gave that speech, making life work, it was entitled, with this proactive agenda of the Republican Party for connecting with ordinary Americans about their concerns and showing that the Republicans cared and had a plan to improve life. We haven't heard much about that lately. It
got disrupted by an agency spying on Americans and spying on reporters, and another targeting whole swaths of groups.
Yeah,
I mean, that got disrupted.
Which I'm sure is fascinating to the average American.
Well, it registers. 7 out of 10 Americans in a CNN poll say that the IRS thing alone is disturbing. You're right. They have not linked it to the president
You know
yet,
what?
but it does bother them.
Americans tune in initially to these scandals, but when they go on and on and on, and it becomes he said, she said, they start to feel like, look,
wait a minute.
you know,
Watergate
Congress
went on and on for months before it registered.
Congress is not doing the people's work. Congress has the lowest
approval. Would you say
approval.
the same as a young kid watching the Watergate hearings? Congress wasn't doing the people's work?
Look, Congress has the lowest approval rating ever.
So did Americans. That was their view of Congress in the 70s when it was going after Nixon. It was a political cabal. Only months into those hearings did they finally start connecting stuff that made it look like a little more. Who knows this?
This is no Watergate.
How do you know that?
We're
How do
not
you know?
talking here. We're not talking here about fascination of the American people. We're not talking about diverting the attention from what the people's job is. We're talking about violations of the Constitution. We're talking about abuse of power. I think that the American people are extremely concerned about the Republicans or just constitutional respecting elected officials
But what do you make
following
of Dave's
through and
point
seeing
that
to the bottom
Congress's
of this?
approval rating is low enough that they risk making it even
approval-
lower?
It's
It doesn't matter.
always low.
Yeah,
It's always
well.
low. And the president's approval rating is low, too. And I think it's important that, I mean, I agree that with David that the Republicans can overplay their hand on this one, but the important thing is that we start to rein in government.
How
and
about we
when we have a
multitask?
president who's talking
Can
about
we follow these scandals and also do the people's bidding by being on top of these events? Why is it all or nothing? And I say this, Republicans in charge, Democrats in charge. Right. When it's scandal time, it's all scandal all the time. Why does it have to be that way?
Well, frankly, if we're...
Go ahead.
If we're not following through on these, then we're allowing the
follow through, but make the tax
you
code
have to follow
simpler,
through.
get
Neil,
entitlement spending under control. But they can't do it.
But it's being perverted because spending and abuses are just
it's Dave
continuing
perverting it, right?
unabated.
You're perverting it. You're destroying our country.
Look, if you look at what most Americans are concerned about, number one issue is jobs and the economy, and to the degree
but you can't make light of this.
To the degree,
I'm just saying we can address your concerns and these concerns. You can have your
concerned
concerns.
about-
I believe
we're
you
not
do.
concerned
hard
about
when
the
this is in
jobs
the
of
headlines
journalists.
day after day.
That'll do it here. We'll see how this goes tomorrow. Good night.